What's going on YouTube? It's TH, back again with another video, and today I'm giving you my way too early NFL 2023-24 award-winning predictions. We're talking Offensive Rookie of the Year, Defensive Rookie of the Year, all the way through Comeback Player of the Year, and MVP Coach of the Year, all that sort of fun stuff. So 7 different awards to run through, and I'm going to give you 5 names for each award, and hey, this is as subjective as it gets, so there's going to be plenty of things you disagree with me on, so let me hear your list of these award winners down below. Who comes away with MVP, Offensive Player of the Year, Defensive Player of the Year, Rookies of the Year, of course, as well. So let me hear all your award picks down below in the comments section. This is just the catalyst for that conversation. Hopefully you guys enjoy. Hit the like button if you do. Subscribe if you're new to the channel and want to see more football content like this. And let's waste no more time. I'm talking about Offensive Rookie of the Year. I think Bijan makes the most sense in a lot of ways. He was one of the few blue chippers I saw in this year's class. And he's going to an offense where, Arthur Smith gave an abundance of a workload to Derrick Henry. No reason to think that Bijan Robinson and, kind of a running back's prime window, he's not going to get that same workload. Additionally, on top of the workload we think he's going to get, and kind of basing that off of Derrick Henry's workload in Tennessee with Arthur Smith then as the OC, Bijan's a way better pass catcher than Derrick Henry. And, no disrespect, one of the best running backs of my generation, but Bijan's got a leg up on him there, so he's going to even put up even crazier numbers there from that standpoint. And we've already seen some clips of practice where the route running's been fully put on display. Then we get to Jordan Addison at 2. I can't imagine him being any worse production-wise than what they got out of Adam Thielen last year. I think it's going to be a pretty good offense, and it's the first time since Kirk Cousins has gotten to Minnesota he's had the same play caller 2 years in a row. Literally, look it up. I mean, you could technically say Gary Kubiak to Clint Kubiak, but they may have the same last name, and the schemes may be very similar. Technically a different play caller. So this is the first time where he's had that year-to-year continuity. Justin Jefferson's going to get a ton of attention. So Jordan Addison, a crisp route runner. I think he's going to get a lot of one-on-ones, and he's kind of the exact wide receiver you want, and he's got a build to beat those one-on-ones. So I think he's in a great spot in a good offense where he can thrive. Then Bryce Young at 3, to me the best quarterback in the class. Of course, height's going to be a concern, but otherwise, many people did not have many issues in his game. So as long as he can see over the offensive line, deliver throws over the middle of the field, which, might I add, he was great at in college. As long as that translates to the NFL level, I mean, the kid's got the talent. And the wide receiver room may not be all that great, but Frank Reich's a really good play caller. I'm interested by Josh McCown being there, Jim Caldwell as well. They put a good kind of environment for him to be stepping into, at least from a coaching staff perspective. Offensive line's pretty solid. Fix up the skill position groups, but that's kind of next offseason's focus. But nevertheless, I think he's a good enough player to kind of make do with what he's got. Dalton Kincaid, I'm already hearing stuff that he's pretty much lining up in the slot, but I think whether it's that or utilizing some 2 tight end sets, Buffalo's looking for someone other than Stephon Diggs to step up and be a reliable number 2. And I think Dalton Kincaid's got the talent to be able to do that. This was a crazy good tight end class, and a lot of people had Kincaid as their tight end 1. He wasn't mine, but I totally understand where people are coming from if he was their tight end 1. And he, just looking at it from a receiving view only, yeah, he probably was the best tight end in this class. So, freak athlete, really good after the catch, and the ability to play him in the slot or in line, I think is beneficial. Not going to give you much in the way of being a blocker, but I think they'll be able to kind of work around that, and that's not really factoring into who wins Rookie of the Year, right? So I think this guy could be Buffalo's number 2 right away, and if so, good offense. Number 2, kind of the same argument we're making for Jordan Addison. The guy's going to put up some big numbers. And then Anthony Richardson, just, the rushing capabilities on top of, kind of the hype we're hearing about him as a passer and how quickly he's learning the offense. I plan on doing a buy-sell video about offseason hype just because I thought that could be kind of fun. I don't know where I really stand on the Anthony Richardson, kind of offseason. He's crushing. He's learning the offense so fast. I'll look into more of what some other beat reporters are saying and see if there is a consensus going out there. But nevertheless, just the rushing ability alone, you have to consider him somewhere here in the top 10 because he's going to score a lot of touchdowns through that avenue, And he's got a couple of okay wide receivers. Michael Pittman Jr. pretty good. Alec Pierce better than I thought. Really excited to see Josh Downs in that offense. Thought he was kind of the perfect slot wide receiver. They ended up getting him in the 3rd round. So Sporting Cast is pretty solid. And assuming Bernard Ryman kind of does continue where he left off last year, like I'm anticipating he is in year 2, the offensive line's going to be really good. And, we'll see where this Jonathan Taylor stuff kind of goes. That's almost impossible to kind of predict because it's two sides kind of buried into their respective, viewpoint on the situation. And I just don't, it could break 1,000 different ways. But good offensive line, good enough receivers, Shane Steichen coming as the head coach. We saw what he did with Jalen Hurts. I think it's a pretty good area and supporting cast around him, and we'll just kind of wait and see what happens with Jonathan Taylor. But if he's there, the situation only gets that much better, and the argument for him Rookie of the Year only gets that much stronger. Defense Rookie of the Year, I'm going to go Jack Campbell. He wasn't the number 1 guy in the betting markets that I was looking at, But I said this since, night one of the draft, and the Lions were getting a lot of flack, which I totally understand. I was one of those people that gave that first round a little bit lower of a grade because with picks 12 and 18, yeah, they did move back from 6, right? But nevertheless, they ended up using 2 first-round picks on a linebacker and a running back. So, 2 positions of lower position value. How much is a running back and a linebacker really moving the needle? I understand that argument. But at the same time, I think Jahmyr Gibbs is going to be really efficient. He's going to put up some pretty good numbers. We'll see about the touchdown total. That's kind of why he wasn't on my offensive rookie of the year list. He was probably the number 6 guy. But if he ends up finding those end zones 6, 7, 8 times collectively between rushing and receiving, he might even touch double digits between those 2 different aspects of his game. Okay, there's an argument that he should have been on that rookie of the year list. But Jack Campbell, that man is going to rag up tackles for a loss. Wouldn't be surprised if he ends up getting a handful of sacks as well. Like, this guy's going to have all the production numbers from a linebacker standpoint. Typically, it's an award given to guys who rack up a ton of sacks and interceptions, but I think Jack Campbell across the board, wouldn't shock me if he ends the year with 4 sacks, a pick or 2, handful of PBUs, and then by far and away leads the rookie class in tackles, and then therefore award voters are just like, well, sweet, he had a great year, and he was kind of the anchor of that defense, so here you go, Jack Campbell. And that's kind of what the argument I'm banking this on. Will Anderson, I wouldn't be shocked in any way if he led this rookie class in sacks, so it really just kind of, that is what it is. He was the number 1 edge in my ranking, so my expectations are that he will lead this rookie class in sacks. Deonte Banks, I think, is just in a great scheme fit. Christian Gonzalez is my number 1 corner, and we can kind of talk about him at 5. He's going to a great scheme. Bill Belichick's obviously had a ton of success with corners. They're kind of needing that number 1 corner, and if you add that element to the defense, does this defense revert back to being one of the best in the league? Can it get to that elite status? If so, then I think a lot of people will accredit that success to Christian Gonzalez. But Deonte Banks is just playing in a defense that's perfectly suited for him. Has a good defensive line in front of him. Doesn't have to be the number 1 corner with Adoree Jackson, but if he's that good and rises to the occasion and ends up overtaking Adoree Jackson as number 1 corner, all this kind of narratively builds into a case where it wouldn't shock me if Deonte Banks ends up winning Rookie of the Year. Now, his ball skills weren't great at Maryland. That's going to have to change if he wants to win this award, but Deonte Banks ends the season with 4 picks, and he's the type of fit in that defense that I think he's going to be. I wouldn't be shocked if he ends up at least being top 3 in this voting. Then we get Kalijah Kancey at 4. Just such a polished pass rusher. There really wasn't much in his game. You could nitpick, but there's not much in this game that people are saying that's going to have to be fixed. Like Tyree Wilson was like, the hand placement's too inconsistent. You're going to have to fix that, but he's got a lot of other traits that are great. Kalijah Kancey's just a little bit small, and the arms are a little short, but he fires on the line. He's great with his hand usage. He's refined from that standpoint. So putting him on a defensive line next to Vita Vea, where he should be kept clean in the run game, and this team's looking for some additional pass rush shoots, right? I'm anticipating a year 3 breakout from Joe Tryon, Shainka. No guarantee Shaq Barrett's even who he was last year, let alone the 2019 Super Bowl run. This team needs another pass rusher to step up, and Kancey's just kind of a guy who was NFL ready, so I could totally see where he plays a big role in that Bucs defense. Getting on to comeback player of the year, I feel like you kind of have to go to Mar Hamlin. So this was the one where I was like, hey, he's kind of the betting favorite. And not only is he the betting favorite, most betting favorites like MVP. Patrick Mahomes is like plus 550, I think is what I saw. Or plus 750, maybe it was on DraftKings. That's plus money. Mar Hamlin right now for comeback player of the year is minus 400 from what I saw. And that's just, you don't see that in preseason markets. So, I get it. Obviously, what happened in Cincinnati was the freak incident of all freak incidents in the NFL. And if he plays a snap, it's remarkable to think that he was able to continue his NFL career after witnessing that on that Monday Night Football game. So I totally understand, therefore I got to put him here at 1. But kind of moving on from that, Tua, obviously a handful of concussions, and the problem is concussions lead to one another, so he's susceptible to suffer more. And if he gets one more, we're probably talking about him retiring. At least that conversation has to be floated out there. So I am anticipating him having a clean bill of health. But the good news is, if he does stay healthy, he's playing in a great offense that's perfectly suited to his skill set. He's got 2 great wide receivers. The offensive line, I feel like it's 4/5 soy there. The running game is going to be efficient. A couple of tweaks to the scheme where I felt like defenses started to figure out Mike McDaniel. But I trust with an offseason of time, he's going to be able to kind of correct those and use the run game basically to combat that, or more underneath stuff to get linebackers close to the line of scrimmage as opposed to those 15 and 20-yard drops we started to see by around Christmas time last year. If that tweak's made, Tua's going to put up insane numbers. It's going to be one of the best offenses in football. So he's got to be a candidate here. John Metchie III. Not often we get to talk about guys overcoming leukemia and then coming back, and he missed his entire rookie season. That almost could work in his advantage because we don't have a bar to compare it to. So if he ends up leading the Texans in receptions and receiving yards, which, hey, that number 1 target kind of guy is up for grabs. I think it could be Tank Dell just as much as it could be John Metchie III. But at the same time, if Metchie III kind of supersedes Robert Woods as that guy to win the slot, or Woods plays out wide and opens a slot opportunity for John Mechie III as a starter, again, it wouldn't surprise me if he ends up being the guy who leads away in targets, receptions, yards, maybe even touchdowns. If he does that, he's got a good argument to win this award. Calvin Ridley, I probably should have put him at 5, to be honest with you, because I don't think the league is going to reward somebody who missed a season on sports betting. This isn't like the DeMar Hamlin, insane injury. It's not like John Mechie III with leukemia. There's a guy who missed time because he did something that I think is a little ridiculous, but that's another argument for another time. Maybe I'll make an editorial video about that. Let me know if you'd want to see that. But that being said, the league made that decision to protect the crown, right, and to protect the shield, right, and protect their image. So to then turn around and give that guy comeback player of the year, feels like you're kind of going back against yourself. So I just don't know what happened. I don't know if it'll happen, but if Calvin Ridley has a year where he ends up being like a top 5 fantasy wide receiver, puts up 1,600 plus yards, and is the clear-cut number 1 guy, maybe the best receiver in that division, makes it even kind of look that much more apparent that he's just a stud, then the argument's going to have to be had. But I just don't see the NFL kind of going back on what they did in regards to that suspension and trying to protect the image of the league and then turning him around and giving him an award. And then Darren Waller, right? I mean, when he's healthy, he's one of the best tight ends in football. And he's going to be another guy we kind of talked about in that buy-sell hype video. But apparently right now he's crushing it. But, even when the trade was made, I was like, this is the perfect guy to add to an offense that doesn't have a clear-cut number 1 possession type of guy. Daniel Fields loves targeting the middle of the field, and Darren Waller working the middle of the field. That's kind of where he's at his best. Yes, he can play out line, he can play wide receiver, but I think he's a little less effective than some of the game's best tight ends in that regard. I want to see him playing in line or playing slot and working between the hashes. He's a huge body, a freak athlete, and hard to bring down after the catch. I mean, he's just kind of the perfect combination of what the Giants don't have in a number 1 wide receiver. So I think target share is going to be there. Production should be there as long as he's healthy. And the role, of course, off of that will be there as well. So a guy who missed a lot of time last year could certainly be, kind of new scene, new role, new offense, newfound confidence in regards to the franchise given to him. And therefore, we're kind of talking about Darren Waller, again, as one of the best tight ends in football, and therefore a candidate for comeback player of the year. Offensive player of the year, Tyreek Hill. I mean, it's not going to surprise anybody. 1 and 2, I mean, it's just kind of like, if you're going to give a top 5 year in and year out, these two just kind of have to consistently be on it. They're going to be playing for 2 teams that I think easily have a shot to win the division. Miami, maybe that's a little hot take-ish, but I mean the Bills are, I think, a little more susceptible than teams or people want to think. And yeah, the Jets are going to be really, really good, but I think Miami, in a lot of ways, you could sell me on them being the best team in the division just as much. And the Vikings, I know they're not the betting favorites, but I think it should be a lot closer than people are talking about between them and Detroit. And these are the 2 number 1 wide receivers in those offenses, and 2 offenses that figure to be among the best in the league. And also, if you're putting together a top 5 wide receiver list and somebody doesn't mention these 2 names, they're probably a Patriots fan, or they're probably a Packers fan. They're probably rooting against these 2 in some way or fashion. Then we get to Christian McCaffrey. Again, kind of a duh one. Needed to get another running back on here on top of Bijan here at 5, which will make my argument there for that. Christian McCaffrey, obviously, freak, both running the ball, but also a fantastic receiving weapon. It's a team that we don't really know what's going to happen at quarterback, and because of that, I think Kyle Shanahan is going to lean into the CMC effect and try to utilize as much of his pacifier effect as he possibly can. Also lean into him to being a running back. Also, I think it helps having Elijah Mitchell there, so the rushing workload doesn't have to be Christian McCaffrey and Christian McCaffrey alone like it kind of was in Carolina from time to time. So as long as he's healthy, yeah, he's got to be a candidate for this. Amon-Ra St. Brown, wouldn't surprise me if he leads the league in receptions this year. I mean, he's clearly the number 1 target on what should be one of the best offenses in football, kind of going back to that Tyreek Hill, Justin Jefferson argument we made earlier. The volume will be there. I think the touchdown total will be there as well. So basically, you're just kind of banking on, can Ben Johnson and Jared Goff do it again? And if they do, Amon-Ra St. Brown's going to have some video game type of numbers, and he's going to have to be a candidate for this list. And then Bijan here at 5. Now, if you're looking to bet Falcons win division, you could totally do that because you can get some decent value on that. But I almost wonder if this is the bet you should place, because if the Falcons, let's say, win the NFC South at 10-7, I don't see it happening because Desmond Ridder becomes a top 10 quarterback in the league. I think it's because that run game is fantastic. They made enough improvements across the board defensively. Ridder didn't lose games, and Bijan Robinson runs for 2,000 yards or has 2,200 all-purpose yards between the air and on the ground. And if that's the case, and 15 touchdowns or something like that. He could easily, be in a way, be this year's fantasy stud. The Falcons win the division on the back of Bijan Robinson plus the work they did to their defense. So again, I'm kind of, is he really the number 5 possible outcome? No, but did I want to have this conversation? Yes. And I almost think this could be another avenue of trying to bet Falcons winning the division other than actually putting a bet slip down for Falcons winning the NFC South. But let me know what you think down below. And then we get the defensive player of the year, Myles Garrett. I think this is his year, right? And I think part of that is this is by far and away the best defensive line that he's had around him, right? Like Siaki Ika in the 3rd round, Dalvin Thompson, big free agent signing. They also make the trade for Zadarius Smith. They sign Ogbo Okoronkwo, project high upside type of defensive ends like an Alex Wright, like an Isaiah McGuire. This defensive line legitimately has dudes on it that aren't named Myles Garrett. So it finally feels like he has got a supporting cast around him to where offenses and offensive lines can't just always shift against Garrett. Because of that, I'm not saying he's going to get one-on-ones on every snap, but he is more likely to see one-on-ones now than he was before. And also just kind of that force multiplier effect. I think we saw that last year with Von Miller in Buffalo. I think Myles Garrett's going to have that, and a lot of people are going to point that back to number 95 in Cleveland. Then we get Micah Parsons, one of the game's best edge rushers. This whole list is kind of intuitive. I didn't put TJ Watt on here because he's already won the award, so there's plenty of other names on here. Joey Bosa, if he stays healthy, you got to have him on here. Nick Bosa, of course, should be on this list, but you get past these top 2, and I think they're kind of the duh candidates I'm going to go with because they haven't won the award yet. And then the other 3, I'm kind of going a little bit more long shot, so, don't hold it too much against me. But Parsons, one of the game's best pass rusher. It's freaky, and especially now that he's pretty much full-time edge. It wouldn't shock me if he leads the league in sacks. Therefore, he's got to be on this list. Aiden Hutchinson, he really turned it on at the end of last year. And if this Lions defense has a 2-year kind of story arc of historically bad to being maybe top half of the league, and Aiden Hutchinson has 17.5, 18 sacks or something like that this year, a lot of people are going to be like, hey, he was absolutely the right pick at number 2, and he's a big reason why this defense turned around. Plus, they kind of patched up the secondary, but, it's the Aiden Hutchinson show. And because of that, I can see that narrative building to make him a candidate for this award. Chris Jones, I don't think anybody's predicting the Chiefs to have the best defense in football, but if they're, again, middle of the pack, maybe even above average, and Chris Jones leads the league in sacks, which I don't think anybody would be necessarily surprised by, then we're talking about, hey, Chris Jones has surpassed Aaron Donald. Donald won this award, 3 times? So it's Chris Jones' turn. It's his turn to win this award. And, if he finishes the year as the best interior pass rusher, I think there's going to be an argument to be made there. And again, kind of a force multiplying effect. So it feels like Chris Jones is opening up all these other pass rush win opportunities for other guys around him. People are going to point back to Chris Jones. I think Xavien Howard. I really thought about Jair Alexander because I think at his best, there's an argument to be made he's the best corner in football right now. Last year wasn't probably the peak of his play. But then Xavien Howard, and he's this guy that I can't remember where I saw this stat, but had as many interception opportunities as Trayvon Diggs. He's just dropped way more of them, which Trayvon Diggs is essentially kind of a wide receiver who plays corner, and he was a former wide receiver. His hands are that of a wide receiver. Howard may not be on that same level, but who's to say he doesn't get some positive regression towards the mean here? And if he gets 11 interception opportunities, he comes down with 9, instead of 50-50, which has kind of been over the last 3 years. That could be some positive regression to make him a candidate for this award. Also, if Miami has one of the best defenses in football, Xavien Howard finishes the year with the league-leading total of interceptions. While Jalen Ramsey's hurt, that's going to be a narrative boost in his favor. Hey, he held down the fort. He was that number 1 corner they needed while Ramsey was hurt. Now they're geared up for the postseason with Ramsey back. Now this is going to be a defense that's a force to be reckoned with. I can already see the headlines kind of writing it themselves, assuming it, of course, does go down that route. So could totally see him being a guy that leads the league in picks, playing, serves as the superstar of one of the best defenses in football, holds down the fort while Ramsey's gone, all those kind of building towards a case that Xavien Howard could win this award. Coach of the Year, and then we'll get to MVP. Coach of the Year, I'm going to go Kyle Shanahan this year. Another one of those names where you could have him on this list year in and year out. But I think if it's Brock Purdy year round, people are going to be like, damn, he did it year long. He really made Mr. Irrelevant a playoff quarterback. Or if you're following my preseason predictions, the number 1 seed in the NFC type of quarterback, which, no disrespect to Brock Purdy, he was better than most Mr. Relevants, probably just about any Mr. Relevant you can point to. Kyle Shanahan is pulling the strings there. It's that and the supporting cast. And the fact that he is better than most Mr. Relevants, for sure. But if they get the number 1 seed, people are going to be like, Kyle Shanahan, you wizard, you've done it again. The one thing maybe holding him back is, probably the analytics community and talking about his use of, clock management and timeouts and things like that. A lot of times he uses timeouts to avoid false starts as opposed to being able to get the play in on time, save those timeouts for more crucial situations. And I agree that's probably the one flaw you kind of have with him as a coach, but you're playing sliders. Coaches can only be as good at everything, and they can only have so much, talent to go around. And Shanahan, to me, is probably the best play caller in football, so I'll sacrifice a little bit when it comes to clock management. Sometimes it costs, but if they go 14-3, get the number 1 seed in the NFC with Brock Purdy, Trey Lance, or Sam Darnold, any of those 3, he's got to be that coach of the year. Then Mike McDaniel, because again, like we talked about with Tua and Tyreek earlier, this easily could be one of the best offenses. And I think with a couple of tweaks to that scheme, being able to force linebackers close to the line of scrimmage, which we've already discussed, there's a clear-cut argument. And if the Dolphins win the AFC East, who a lot of people are calling the best division in football right now, and you got that, you got the AFC West, you got the AFC North, really just kind of the AFC in general. Yeah, there's an argument made. And hey, it wouldn't shock me. I'm not predicting it, but it wouldn't shock me if Tua is healthy and this team goes 13-4 and wins the AFC. Just because it's an arms race right now, and teams are going to beat up on each other. And 13-4 might be good enough. 14-3 might be good enough. Like, it probably will be good enough at 14-3, but 13-4 might be just enough to edge past the Chiefs. And I think they have a head-to-head this year too, so that could be the determining factor. And obviously, they play 2 games against the Bills. So yeah, if they get the AFC, the number 1 seed in the AFC, it's kind of hard not to consider Mike McDaniel as a front runner. But even if they just win the AFC East, it's one of the best offenses in football. People will clearly see, hey, he's the orchestrator of this, offense. He's the guy that kind of give that credit towards, and therefore he'll be a pretty highly considered candidate for this award. Then DeMeco Ryans, I'm just trying to find a name where it's like, who could have the team that nobody's anticipating being 500 or better, but maybe they could be. I think Houston, right? Like if CJ Stroud is really good, hits the ground running, they get enough wide receiver production from Woods and, John Mechie and Nico Collins kind of figures it out. And Tank Dell maybe is a big hit as a third rounder and makes an impact right away. Dalton Schultz, right? And a couple of, okay running backs, especially David Pierce, like him a lot. Offensive line solid. Like I could see that offense being, kind of average, and then he works his magic. It's that defense close to average. And we're talking about, in a pretty rough division, let's be honest. 8-9, 9-8, and for a lot of people, that's going to be surprising. Because a lot of people are still talking about Houston as like this 3-4 win team, and I predict them to have 6 wins, so I'm a little bit ahead of that. But even then, I was like, 7 wins wouldn't shock me, and that kind of feels like more where I want to have them at. But you work with the schedule you're given. If this team wins 8-9 games, people are gonna be like, wow, DeMeco Ryans, wow, he did it, like insane. And if this defense is from one of the worst, one of the 3 worst in the league, probably the last 2 years, to middle of the road to above average, people are going to give him that credit as well. Zach Taylor, Mike Tomlin kind of ran it out. I think these are your 2 teams that, the Bengals could win the AFC, title. They could just be the number 1 seed in the AFC. Make it a good argument for Zach Taylor. I feel like he is much less of a reason for their success than a Joe Burrow, a Lou Anarumo, and those wide receivers and things like that. Even Duke Tobin, their GM. But nevertheless, if they get the number 1 seed, he'll be considered. And then Mike Tomlin, I am a Steelers fan, so I don't want this to come across as bias, and I am not predicting the Steelers to win the division. But I know a lot of people are at least seeing them as a wild card team. And if Mike Tomlin finishes above 500, and furthermore, if they go 11-6 and make the playoffs, I don't think a lot of people are seeing that coming. Now, you have some people on the hopium for sure, and then you have some people who are like, this defense is legit. They got wide receivers, and they're kind of just not factoring in Matt Canada, so I think that's skewing their judgment a little bit. That being said, if I'm wrong, and this team goes 11-6, makes the playoffs, that will shock people. If this team wins the the AFC North, it's hard not to consider Mike Tomlin a frontrunner. If they beat out the Bengals, the Ravens, and the Browns to win this division, you're gonna have to put him on this list. So he's shades of the DeMeco Ryan, where the expectations might, I could see where they supersede that. And of course he's had a stretch of finishing over 500, so never bet against Mike Tomlin. Anything's possible. I'm predicting that it won't extend, but I did the same thing last year and I was wrong. And as a Steelers fan, I was totally happy to be wrong. So wanted to throw him out there. And of course, most people would widely consider, if you're doing a top 5 head coaches list, I'd be a little shocked if most people didn't have Mike Tomlin somewhere there in the top 5. And if he's not in the top 5, he's almost assuredly there in the top 10. He's just universally admired and seen as one of the best coaches in the league. So got to put him on this list. And then to round things out, MVP. I think Jalen Hurts gets it done. And I got the NFC quarterback winning over 4 AFC QBs. So obviously this is a QB-friendly award, but I think Hurts both with a great supporting cast around them. I know there's a change in OC, but I think Brad Johnson's going to basically just run it back. They're going to be doing very much of the same stuff that they did with Sirianni. And Sirianni still being there, I think it brings kind of a consistency factor. The wide receivers are great. The running backs, no Miles Sanders, but they'll be just fine. The offensive line's fantastic. And they'll play in some big games, too. The spotlight factor is obviously huge. His rushing ability boosts up his stats even more. And especially if they win, I don't have them winning the number 1 seed in the NFC, so maybe this is where my argument kind of falls on its face, but they win the number 1 seed in the NFC. It's hard not to see him as at least in the top 3 conversation. That being said, the guys behind him, it's hard not to argue. Patrick Mahomes is the best player in the league, kind of bar none to me. I don't really think it's even a conversation anymore. And the Chiefs could win the number 1 seed all over again. They could just kind of do the same thing we've seen Kansas City do over the last half decade. And if that's the case, he's towards the top of the league and, touchdown totals, touchdown to interception rates, PFF passing grade, all that sort of stuff. Plus, we get to see what he does with his legs, every so often. betting against the best player in the league not to win MVP is a little silly, but you always got to change it up. Then we get Trevor Lawrence. Like, if we're seeing something where last year, the last half of last year, is just kind of the stepping off point, and that's just kind of the beginning of the growth curve that he's on. I mean, the ceiling gets even higher for a guy who was touted as the best QB prospect since Luck or Peyton Manning even. So yeah, kind of buying into that. Plus now he's got Christian Kirk was better than I thought he'd be, and he served a pivotal role for that offense. But Calvin Ridley's a better player. And then you make Christian Kirk that number 2 target, and let him work solely out of the slot. He's going to be a threat. You get Evan Ingram back. You add another running back in the backfield. TBD on the tackle situation. But as long as that holds up, supporting cast is there. It's year 2 in that Doug Peterson offense, which is obviously by far and away better than what he had with Urban Meyer there. Yeah, I mean, we could, like I said, just see the back half last year just be the beginning of what we see Trevor Lawrence and the heights that he'll rise to. Josh Allen, Justin Herbert, I'm not shocking anybody here. I mean, like, Bills could be the number 1 seed in the AFC. The Chargers, they do it, then I think Herbert almost assuredly probably in that top 2 conversation for this award. So it kind of had to put him on there, and it wouldn't shock me. I'm not anticipating it, but wouldn't floor me. At least if they win that division, maybe they could win the AFC as well. But Allen, one of the best quarterbacks, top 3 in my opinion, right there with Joe Burrow and Patrick Mahomes. Freak on the ground as well. So the numbers are going to kind of span across the entire box score. Herbert, new offense. So if Kellen Moore really does kind of open something else up in that offense, specifically deep passes down the field, you add a Quentin Johnson. So now you add that big playability, that speed threat over the top, adds a little bit more flash to the offense. 2 guys that are going to play a lot of primetime games as well. And the AFC is an arms race. So, again, if you win the AFC West, you're a pretty good candidate. If you win the AFC in general, it's hard not to envision you as a front runner. So, had to put all those guys on there. But I do think it's going to be the NFC quarterback that comes away with the MVP award, at least as I sit right now, and make that prediction with Jalen Hurts. But, guys, let me hear your award predictions down below in the comment section. Who's your MVP, Coach of the Year, Offensive Player of the Year, Defensive Player of the Year, Rookies of the Year, yada, yada, yada. All that sort of fun stuff. Let me hear your picks down below in the comments section. Hopefully, you guys enjoyed. Hit that like button if you did. Subscribe if you're new to the channel. I want to see more football content like this. But that is going to do it for me. Hope you have a fantastic rest of your day. And until next time, my name is Teach, and I am signing off.